Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited about this event. So I am going to start with a land acknowledgement. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. April Callis. I'm the Associate Director of LGBTQ+ initiatives in the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion. So starting with our land acknowledgement. Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who along with other indigenous groups ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami tribe are proud of this work and of the more than 140 Miami students who have attended Miami since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program. I have to start with a personal note, which is when I was told what the theme of Women's History Month was, which was women providing healing, promoting hope, I immediately thought of the connection between the lesbian women and the AIDS epidemic. And so I kind of came to everybody saying, I would really love to get a speaker to talk about this, and was super excited to immediately get the yes. And what I found out as I was researching it is that there's not a ton of research on this topic. I was surprised at the lack of research that had happened in this area. So I was thrilled to find Dr. Beth Hutchinson's work and to reach out and then pretty much immediately get a response of, yes, I would love to come and talk. So that was a thrilling few days in my life. Thank you for giving me that win. So to talk a little bit about Dr. Hutchinson, before and after receiving her PhD from the University of Washington in 1994, Beth Hutchinson has worked as an editor and writer for nonprofit organizations and grant-funded projects, while also teaching a variety of university courses focusing on LGBTQ literature and film, histories of sexuality, and race, class, gender, and sexuality in the United States. Along with examining how intersections of gender, race, and sexuality are expressed in the history of US blood donation drives and policy, her academic work traces the ways changing understandings and expressions of sexuality are both recorded and shaped by material culture. During 15 years as Associate Director of the Institute for Research on Women at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, she coordinated film and lecture series, conferences, and publications, including Gendering Disability, which she co-edited with Bonnie G. Smith. Since relocating to Portland, Oregon, she has been a faculty member in the Department of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Portland State University, volunteers for QDoc, the only US film festival devoted to LGBTQ documentaries, and serves as a board member for multiple community, statewide, and national nonprofit organizations. So Dr. Hutchinson, thank you so much for being here today.
No, it's really a pleasure, April, and it's fun to be virtually part of an informal room where, and I'm sincere about this, where folks feel comfortable moving about, doing what they need to do to be comfortable instead of rigidly sitting in folding chairs, which is almost every event that I ever did at Rutgers. It was like, okay, we're all in rows and you can't move for the next 90 minutes. Well, I won't be talking for 90 minutes, so you get a break anyhow. But it is a real privilege to be with you today, and I appreciate April. As you were speaking though, April, about not finding anybody, I want to do a shout out to Jenny Breyer, who's at, I think she's at University of, well, she's physically located in Chicago, probably at University of Chicago, but her last name is B-R-I-E-R. She has done an amazing oral history in collaboration with other people, with women who are living with AIDS or HIV in rural and urban settings. So they have 3 different target areas where her team has been collaborating with the women living those experiences to capture that. And there's a fabulous website. So I'll send you that link, April, and I hope you can share it and find out more about Jenny's work, because she is really fantastic. And of course there are others, but I do agree that from the start of the epidemic, the women's vulnerability to getting infected with HIV was little noticed. As many of you may know, the health consequences of that infection represent different in bodies with female reproductive organs than they do in men. Anyway, so that's not my talk, but given the opportunity, I thought I would say that. So I think you can now see these 1953 where we begin. I'm not going to only talk about women and or lesbians, and in fact we're starting with mostly men, but it's fascinating to me that the engagement of people in the LGBTQ plus communities goes back as far as I can trace to 1953. So I realize some of you probably can't read this text, and I won't read every word on it, but 1953, the FBI is surveilling the Mattachine Society of Los Angeles. Mattachine was an early homophile organization, really trying to prove at that moment in 1953, we're respectable, we're American citizens, we served in the army, some of us. And so their idea was to do a blood drive using their name, donate it to a fund for people with hemophilia, who at that time required frequent blood transfusions in order to stay alive so that their blood could clot. And because of their respectable but overt sexuality, the FBI spent a lot of time documenting all of the activities of the Mattachine Society, including they did a blood drive. Here, the names of the people involved have been obscured, I think, with a white piece of paper by the FBI itself. This material is provided through the Freedom of Information Act, which allows us to see things. And this, just in brief, a different cut, a different thing. They've reviewed the newsletter circulated by the Mattachine Society in Los Angeles, and they announced a blood bank party, which was organized by the Southern Area Council, Southern California, for the purpose of donating blood to the Hemophilic Fund. So just these traces of what I'm going to call our history, LGBTQ plus history, in unexpected places, I find super fascinating. 1969, there were other blood drives. People recall, for example, bloodmobiles parked outside of bars serving gay men or men who have sex with men back in the day. So it's not that nothing happened between 53 and 69, but let's move on. This is Mattachine Society of Washington, D.C. 16 years later, things are a little bit more politically out there. This is the banner of the October 1969 version of their newsletter, the first newsletter that they published. And their guest at the next meeting will be a representative from the American Red Cross. And yes, they've initiated a new project to work with the American Red Cross to provide blood for any MSW, Mattachine Society of Washington member who needs it. I don't know that this kind of blood banking is so much in operation today, but in former years, you and your organization, a church group, your club, your workplace, could organize blood drives everyone who could would donate blood. And if you or a member of your family needed a transfusion, that could be provided. So here's Mattachine. And negotiations will be undertaken in an attempt to have lovers and roommates protected in the same way that members of the immediate family would normally be protected. I'm not sure what came of that, but an interesting moment. And this I find so touching, from 1973 on that very issue. This is the New York Times in 1973. Homosexual family units. What? Boston. Homosexual couples have been recognized as family units by the Massachusetts Red Cross Blood Program. About 100 pints of blood were donated by the couples this weekend after the Red Cross issued an emergency appeal. When the Red Cross agreed to recognize the couples as family units, they became eligible to receive blood from the program for any children of either partner. I mean, this is stunningly amazing to me. And I fear quite short-lived, but this is how our history works. One step forward, one step sideways, one step backward, try again. Overall, moving forward. Blood drives are often an expression of empathy and horror and shock and wanting to do something productive, wanting to contribute in some tangible way. And blood has, of course, a very symbolic valence when it comes to that kind of symbolism. We're connected. I want to save you. I'm not giving my life itself, but I'm giving my life's blood. I'm giving the thing that keeps me alive. I won't read all of this. It was a very grisly firebombing of a bar in New Orleans called the Upstairs. It was literally upstairs. And the Metropolitan Community Church, then very young, a Protestant denomination, founded by and specifically to serve LGBTQ plus folks, was firebombed. 29 people were killed because they couldn't get out of this upstairs space. And it was on a Sunday. The MCC met there on Sunday afternoons. The services themselves were over, but among the dead was the pastor of MCC New Orleans, the Reverend Bill Larson. But the point, blood is desperately needed. And nationwide, again, 1973, the gay press as such was in very early stages, but everyone, including the Lesbian Tide, which was nationally distributed in those years, made it clear. And you could just go to your local blood cross center, say that you want the blood credits to go for people who survived this terrible fire. The National New Orleans Memorial Fund, and it would make their recovery not easier, but not as expensive, because there are charges when massive amounts of blood are needed. Kansas City, there was a terrible beating of a gay man who required 174 pints of blood and then passed away. Okay, sorry, 144, used in an attempt to save his life. And at this point, the blood should be credited to that account, to his account at the hospital in Kansas City, in order that his family and survivors not have to pay for the expenses incurred in trying to save him from a horrible attack. And again, this story was covered, it was shocking at the time, it was covered in lots of gay papers. 1977, Everard Baths in New York City. Again, terrible fire. This is from the New York Times. And the New York Times on this particular day had two stories, one just about the fire, and this one just about homosexuals mobilizing to aid the victims of the fire. And the very first paragraph, again, homosexuals in New York City and elsewhere. I mean, it's reminiscent of the Pulse nightclub, which some of you remember. After that shooting, all over the country, we were donating blood. Again, as a way to connect, as a way to come together, stand in line, and feel like we're a part of something constructive and altruistic, unselfish, that might make something a little bit better for some of the people involved. Anyway, they lined up to donate blood, helped identify bodies, and promised to raise money on behalf of those who survived and were injured. Just want to say, it's like the start of a joke, and I don't tell jokes. A drag queen, Nicole Murray Ramirez, is always known in the San Diego gay press, and he's there quite a lot. He uses he, him pronouns, but is always and self-described as a drag queen. So a drag queen, a Vietnam veteran, and an ACLU attorney walked into a San Diego police station and were told, no, you can't have a permit for a parade/gay march. 1974, Stonewall was 69, so most cities didn't have it together to try to do the kinds of marches and parades that had already begun in New York City and a few other places. But nevertheless, 1974, later that month, over 100 people skirted the law by marching on the sidewalk, and that's known as San Diego's first Pride Parade. But hello, Pride Parade, many wore brown paper bags over their heads for anonymity, while the people that they passed spewed homophobic verbal attacks at them. Blood donation, blood drives continued to be going on in the LGBTQ plus community, mostly among gay men and men who have sex with men, because in this country in particular, there's a startling disparity between blood donation by women and blood donations by men. But who can resist in 1979, blood donors make better lovers. So make your appointment and come by the Hollywood blood bank. By the end of the 70s, sometimes the story is painted with very broad strokes. It's not that all lesbians and all gay men were at loggerheads and hated each other or couldn't be in the same room, but there were many instances of bars catering to gay men and catering to lesbians that made it clear that that's what they were catering to, and if you were of the other group, you were not welcome. Lots of tensions. So 1982, a beginning awareness of what we now know as HIV/AIDS, and Virginia Puzo had recently been selected as director of the National Gay Task Force, which over time, while she was executive director, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, the NGLTF, and now it's known usually as the task force, and has very much broadened its remit. So the question comes because, of course, there hadn't been cooperation between gay men and women. Do you see a growing cooperation? I do, a slow process, but it's happening. If a woman's a feminist and has difficulty with certain issues among gay men, I'm paraphrasing, she also has to understand where there's a danger to one of us, there's a danger to all of us. We've got to figure out what we agree on and focus on that. On what we disagree, let's wait until the crisis is over and we'll deal with it. And I have to say, maybe as an Ohioan, this is my value. Like, let's find what we can be together about and make progress, rather than worrying about the ways we differ from one another. So to me, these moments of coalition and attempts to find common ground and be constructive are very meaningful to me. 1983, this is a picture from San Diego, imprison homosexual blood donors. And San Diego at that time had, over the course of my time period here, had between 2 and 4 newspapers specifically for the gay community: the Gazette, the San Diego Gay News, Upshot, and I think one other. Anyway, here, AIDS may be a predominantly male affliction, but one stone cast upon a homosexual is ultimately aimed at all of us. And this is true, and it comes into my blood story as well. But now the Blood Sisters begin. San Diego women may not have been the first to use this term, Blood Sisters. in talking about blood donation in the context of HIV/AIDS. They were so successful in this first drive in 1983. 170 women were able to donate blood in one day at the San Diego Blood Bank, which conveniently was located in Hillcrest, which at that time was the core of the San Diego gay lesbian community. Many bars, residents, restaurants that were owned by and or catered to the gay community. So this was a project of the Women's Caucus of the San Diego Democratic Club. The San Diego Democratic Club, which basically existed so that gay men and lesbians, and I'm using that language rather consistently because that is the language that the newspapers and the people of that time, including me, used. But for the most part, I think the people included in the more contemporary LGBTQ plus were meant to feel comfortable and welcome there as well. And there were also some people who identified and were no doubt straight involved, but it was, in the words of the newspaper, largely gay. At this moment in 1983, it was not, the FDA hadn't prohibited men who had sex from men from donating blood, but they were increasingly being discouraged from donating blood. And the blood levels locally were showing the effects of that, a diminution in blood supplies. So part of this was just to get more blood into the local and national blood supply. But again, this is kind of a banking thing. There was a San Diego Democratic Club account. You donate, the club gets credit, and then anyone who needs a blood transfusion or other kinds of blood products could apply to the club. But later on, it became clear that you didn't have to be a member of the club, you didn't have to be gay or lesbian if you needed it, especially later on if you were living with HIV. All right, so here's a photo from that first drive of several of the blood sisters, as well as women who had just come to donate as part of the effort. Barbara Vick had the idea. Women came out of the woodwork, women that didn't want to have anything to do with men, even gay men, said another blood sister, Peggy Heathers. It was an incredible experience to see the caring and the support. So yeah, I mean, part of the advantage of being part of the San Diego Democratic Club is that it was a pretty big group. It was a large gay community and lots of them were identified as Democrats. The blood bank weren't really ready for it. They're shocked. They didn't think there'd be so many. And also now they've got lesbians hanging out outside the blood bank. What's that going to do to them? But they didn't freak out too badly. So one more photo of a caring moment of that blood donation. Okay, the Metropolitan Community Churches at their international convention suggested that they form a blood bank for the use of persons, people living with AIDS. They conclude, if nothing, or the reporter here concludes, if nothing else, this resolution calls attention to the fact that Jerry Falwell's punitive deity, this punishing God who many folks that we might consider of the religious right said that the horrible effects of living with AIDS in the 80s was the appropriate punishment for same-sex sexuality anyway. But the supposedly punitive deity is letting lesbians off scot-free because the incidence of HIV infection among lesbians at that time was vanishingly small and continues to be vanishingly small. Well, not vanishingly small. It continues to be small, except that we now better understand the higher risk activities that women can engage in. So again, this is the idea catching on. So now in Los Angeles, they're planning the same year, but several months after the San Diego one, December 1983, a lesbian blood sister blood drive at 3 locations in Southern California. We believe the primary reason for the decrease in blood donation locally is the responsible decision, the voluntary decision at that time by gay men, most gay men, not to donate during the AIDS crisis. And here they are, 1984, the San Diego Pride Parade. So 1 year after the first drive. And this banner and this logo of theirs cracks me up because it says blood sister. And it's very deliberate. You know, it's a great graphic. You know, they've intentionally used this kind of, I don't know, art deco-y font. But there's no room for an S, and they didn't want there to be room for an S. And I'll show you another iteration of that in a minute. So interesting. In my world, SAGE means, and when I say my world, I mean like in the 1990s, I knew SAGE as seniors acting in a gay environment, but I can't, even in the best, I can't see what those initials, there's letters after each of those big SAGE on the groovy convertible, but don't know. This was the official Unity and More in '84 was the official Lambda Pride nationally theme for gay pride parades in '84. But this is the San Diego iteration of that. And they've got little, you can't really see this, but it's a symbolic iteration of 10 because '84 is 10 years after the first parade in 1974. Yes, okay, Jerry Falwell, Moral Majority. Oh, and this is from a women's newspaper from Vancouver, BC. There are good reasons why some lesbians have found it difficult or impossible to work with gay men. Gay men have to work on their sexism. And I mean, this is a common theme, and I would say most gay newspapers serving a lesbian and gay readership at some point during 1983 to 85 would have a full page spread or a double spread of lesbians. What do you think about gay men? Gay men, what do you think about lesbians? And there would be a variety of views. You know, they're great, I have no problem, or they're so sexist, I can't stand them, or whatever. However, the AIDS crisis should prompt lesbians to look at any judgment which could be influenced by internalized homophobia. Well, I don't think sexism really usually stems from that. But it's another plug for the Blood Sisters of California. Here's a way to actively support one another. And now there starts to be some backlash, not in San Diego, but in Southern California. There was a lesbian blood drive planned, and in Orange County, and the director of the Red Cross office there, after the drive had been planned, and a few days, 3 days before it was to actually happen, he canceled it. So this director of the Red Cross Blood Bank, Blood Supply Center, said he knew, unlike male homosexuals, lesbians had a low risk of contracting AIDS, but the public could not distinguish between what was a high risk group and what was not. So again, for me, this is a kind of chilling flash forward to some of the current things we've seen in COVID, in the COVID crisis and elsewhere, of we have a message and we know we're correct about what would be safe to do or what would be most important to do for public safety and health, but the public can't wrap their heads around it, so we're not going to try. Partly this happened because the general press referred to homosexuals, and since lesbians have sex with the same sex, things in the way people think about it, the sense that homosexual blood was unsafe meant for lots of folks that lesbian blood was also unsafe. Okay, this is from a pastor of a metropolitan community church in 1985, whose church blood drive, which was going to be just lesbians, and the Red Cross said that no, they couldn't have their blood mobile, which had come to the MCC church many times before. They couldn't come to a gay establishment, so-called, to receive blood because it might cause a panic in the general population. Oh, here's the blood sister again. So this is what convinced me that, okay, it wasn't at all a typo. It was designed to be blood sister. And I would love to talk to folks there about why that was. But they're the honorary grand marshals of the 1985 parade. This particular flyer for a San Francisco blood drive in 1985, it's a little notorious because Dr. Lorraine Day, a woman who worked at a nearby hospital, saw this shocking pink flyer, and then a gay man that she worked with told her that the place that they were going to be having this blood drive was a known cruising place, and it was dirty and it was just a degenerate place, and that clearly the people giving blood would not be safe to contribute to the blood bank. This was big news in The Advocate, published in San Francisco, which at that time was a newspaper rather than a glossy magazine. It was front page news, this controversy over the Women's Day blood drive and the way it was shut down. So the San Diego Democratic Club, lesbian, gay, in San Francisco, they were empowered to be more overt about a connection to lesbian and gay life in their name. So the Harvey Milk Lesbian Gay Democratic Club. Earlier, there had been an Alice B. Toklas Democratic Club in that area, where you had to be a little bit more in the know to know that Alice B. Toklas was Gertrude Stein's lover for decades and partner. So this is Our Boys Need Blood, the Women's Day Drive. And this one was very successful. 136 women lined up to donate, 115 were eligible. So one could be found ineligible for a variety of reasons: being underweight, not having enough iron in your blood, being anemic, running a fever. So it's normal to have a handful of people be disqualified from donating. And this is a blood drive, a women's blood drive, where your gift will support the San Francisco Tavern Guild Foundation. So basically, gay and lesbian bar owners in San Francisco for their charitable work in the community. And I would love to know more about the Godmother Blood Bank that's referenced down here at the bottom. But so far, I don't have a thing. This is one of these. Everyone has an opinion. This is from the student newspaper at University of California, San Diego. And here at the end, it's like, let's just channel everything into a blood drive like the San Diego Blood Sisters did. But AIDS is not just a gay male issue in the community, it is a gay issue. There may be some folks in the room who can resonate with this. We not only get shit from heterosexuals, but we often get shit from lesbians too. It's as though AIDS has given everyone another reason to chastise bisexuals. There are very few mentions of the idea of bisexuality or the existence of people who identify as bisexual in gay papers that I've seen during this time period. So I find it interesting and great that they found someone who was willing to talk. And sorry that this was just another way to blame bisexual people for the problem. Can you catch AIDS at a lesbian bar? Asked a heterosexual friend. I struggled not to scream. The Blood Sisters made such an impact, and Virginia Puzo from the National Gay Task Force had visited San Diego during one of the first drives, as she was visiting communities around the country. And everywhere she went, she talked about this incredible Blood Sisters blood drive. And she also published a couple articles or was interviewed for, and then published an editorial and opinion piece in USA Today, which of course had a broad national distribution, kind of in middle America as well. They were invited to receive a National Recognition Award from the Gay Task Force Fund for Human Dignity, kind of their foundation in New York City. And the Reagan administration official, the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Edward Brandt, had agreed to come. I mean, he had been very supportive of these blood drives all along, why he was invited to come. Word has it that the White House was inundated with telegrams, phone calls, moral majority objecting to the idea that a representative of the presidential administration would go to a gay event and recognize lesbians and anything involving AIDS. No. So he very quickly withdrew, denying that that had anything to do with pressure. Barbara Vick, whose idea had been to do to organize the Blood Sisters, went ahead to New York, got the award on behalf of all the people who had been involved, and that was fine. I see I'm not going to get everywhere I want to go. The Albert Braille was a great, an incredible coalitionally and transformatively minded member of the San Diego gay community. And it was his idea to form the Little Brothers of the Blood Sisters. They gave women rides to and from the blood bank. They reserved space in a nearby park, and they catered a picnic for everyone who had given blood that day, to just relax and wait for their friends to come back from the blood bank after they'd given. And in conjunction with the Blood Sisters, he also, and whoever the other little brothers were, he's the only name I know, worked with bar owners so that often if you had given blood, you could go to the bar and get a free drink that day. We don't usually center drinking quite so much now, but back then that was the thing. So he was, like many of the Blood Sisters, he was active in many different ways. Dyson Bikes, Lesbian Motorcycle Club, blood drive, that got canceled again because, and here, according to the person who canceled it, it wasn't even because they were lesbians. It was because they wanted the blood bank, the Bloodmobile, to come to Gurneyville, California, which was just beginning, I think, to become a real gay and lesbian hotspot. And so it was turned down because the American Association of Blood Banks, kind of an equivalent to the American Red Cross, the American Red Cross, American Association of Blood Banks, and one other are the three major blood suppliers in this country. Well, they had a policy restricting donations from high-risk regions. And Gurneyville was a high-risk region. So nothing personal, like if you wanted to donate it in, I don't know, downtown Newport Beach. I'm just trying to think of a ritzy Orange County heterosexual-ish place at that time. That'd be fine, you Dyson Bikes. And here they've changed their banner, and I think this may be fuzzy on your screen, but I love it because it's Welcome Blood Sisters, and then a tiny white print at the bottom from Little Brothers. So I just think of Albert Bell and his pals making this banner and putting what I think are sequins or glitter in the heart, so it's shiny and groovy. These women named here are all kind of central through this entire 10-year run of the Blood Sisters. So again, Be a Blood Sister in 1990, San Diego, it's still happening. The Blood Sisters in other parts of the country did not have anywhere near this kind of multi-year, very visible presence in the community. Dr. Cynthia Lawrence had been part of the Blood Sisters from the very beginning, and I just couldn't resist including her. African-American public school educator, and then for 3 decades, college professor in San Diego. She founded the San Diego Women's Chorus. She was a founding Blood Sister. She was in the San Diego Democratic Club. And she did other things I can't even think of right now. Okay, and now it comes to San Diego, 11 years in. 1992 is the last Blood Sisters drive in San Diego that I know of, but here's 1994. US blood supply hits lowest level since World War II. They had less than a 1-day supply. We had less than a 1-day supply nationally, which is very bad. So the San Diego Blood Bank, who had been working with the Blood Sisters all these years, refuses to publicize or promote an event encouraging lesbians to donate blood because the name was the San Diego Lesbian Community Blood Drive. They just couldn't have it because of the word lesbian. And was meant to reproduce the success of the last Blood Sisters Drive in 1992. Now, Anne Garwood was in that photo where I didn't read all the names of the women posing around the Blood Sisters banner a few slides ago. So something happened, and it's one of these things. Part of my goal here, friends listening at Miami, is for you all to think about, what questions could be answered, what don't we know? And certainly, I have many questions, despite the fact I've been thinking about this and trying to learn things about it for a long time. They tried to complain, you can't turn us away because of the word lesbian. San Diego Human Relations Commission didn't care. Okay, couldn't resist. This photo was taken in 1974. They're still partners today. I know that at least a year or two ago, Dr. Lawrence, she now uses just Dr. Lawrence rather than Lawrence Wallace. Dr. Lawrence turned 81 and the Women's Chorus did a fundraiser in her honor. Anyway, so here's Peggy Heathers and Dr. Cynthia Lawrence Wallace in 1974, Blood Sisters and Still Together. So now I am chugging to the end here with your permission. Just talking about some different iterations of what's been happening in this century. So in this right to save idea of a blood drive originated in Phoenix from lesbian activist Meg Sneed, but in San Diego, a woman named Sarah Beth Brooks led the Right to Save blood drive. And this was about, okay, the FDA then until 2020 was permanently banning any man who had ever had sex with a man ever. You cannot donate blood ever. And so this was a pushback against that. But the idea was to find men who would test negative for HIV, for hepatitis B and C, and for another bloodborne disease. We've been tested. Our blood is, we know it's better than most people know about their blood. So have them come, and in the first iteration of Right to Save, it was be turned away and then say, okay, I found these people who will give in my name. And because a pint of blood can save up to 3 lives, can be used to treat up to 3 different people depending on their needs. So the right to save 3 lives. And a little shout out, Sarah Beth Brooks identifies as asexual. The year after this Right to Save, in 2010, she began Asexual Awareness Week. So I just want to say, as of last year, it's been renamed ACE Week. So it's like, okay, we've had 10 years to be aware. they want to move forward. So ACE Week is coming in October this year. This is again, a consciousness raising gay lesbian blood drive where you give a pint of blood, we'll give you a quart of motor oil and protest the Middle East wars of the time. And this is my final thing. And this is not about women, but because it's a makerspace, a series of events and opportunities that you're experiencing today, I wanted to just share this with you. And also I'm excited about it because I just found it. So this is Gay Men's Health Crisis, GMHC, which started in New York at the beginning of the HIV health crisis, and a communications, health-centered communications, I think, publicity operation, FCB Health. But in this case, these are 2 men who had been working with this blood equality campaign, which you would guess from the name is about the FDA regulations about who can give blood are not equitable. they're not scientific. The American Red Cross and other blood suppliers agree about that. And change is coming very, very, very slowly. But this is a COVID specific iteration of the work that these two men had been doing with blood equality prior to the epidemic. So they're each survivors of COVID-19, which means that their blood is antibody rich. Now, this was in 2020. Perhaps the science and the thinking around the utility of using blood from people who have survived COVID-19 has changed. But at the moment that this happened, they had been turned away because they're men who have sex with men, despite the fact that their blood might have been useful. And the NAT tests for the virus, test specifically for the virus in one's blood. And so it's pretty absolute as a test goes. It's the art, of course, that I thought you might be interested in. The art is by a Malaysian artist whose last name is Lau, L-O-W. And he usually, his mode is scribble art. But in this case, the Blood Equality Campaign asked him to use his scribble technique, but in the form of blood vessels, so that these men's faces and their masks for COVID-19 are literally realized in the symbolic form of blood vessels. And then some of you are doing fabric projects, I know. So this is their final, their I think most recent, the Blood Flags series, and on their website you can see each of these in more full size. But this is US with a plasma bag, and here it says the US has tested positive for discrimination, and there's a similar statement about each of the countries. So using elements, recognizable elements from the national flags, and these are specifically countries whose policies around blood donation are lagging behind science: Canada, Australia, Brazil, and Germany. And it's interesting to me, and I would also like to know more about the people doing the sewing here. They're identified on the website as seamstresses, so I take it that they're all women. This final photo is quite cryptic to me, but they're doing handwork in large part, appliquing these symbolic transfusion vessels onto rainbow flags. And I just wanted to conclude, if you're thinking about donating blood or wondering what the current rules are, I was pleased again to learn very recently that the Red Cross has a much better way of communicating about how the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the federal agency which legally controls whose blood can be given or what elements have to be accounted for. So it used to be very cumbersome, and they didn't used to have all these categories spelled out: men who have sex with men, women who have sex with women, transgender donors, and it works out. So I was assigned this at birth, and here's who I am, but I've had sex with this person, this kind of category of people. Can I give blood? Which I think is very useful, and I think respectfully done for readers, and intersex donors, and gender nonconforming, non-binary, and for asexual donors. So it's a very long URL, but I've put in red ink because if you just wanted to Google Red Cross blood as one word and then LGBTQ-donors, you will get to that webpage. You don't need the entire URL to get there. And with that, I just want to do what I didn't think to do at the start, which is to say, thank you so much, April, for inviting me, for Sarah following up, for Sean's support, and really to say that I know that events like this don't happen without a whole lot of work and organizing and cleaning and moving furniture and getting equipment. And I hope snacks for y'all and lunch. I really recognize the invisible, unsung work that goes into making this kind of event happen, as well as daily life at a university. So I want to thank all the workers who aren't in the room, who are part of that. And, you know, really students, I just love being here with you. And I hope that some of this was interesting or useful to you. And I didn't have a title sheet, but it would have said, you know, please contact me if you want, if you wonder about anything, if you thought that went by too fast, or what did you mean by that? Or could you talk, probably not talk more, but could you write a succinct paragraph? I would love to. And that's HUT, the number 2, like HUT2, the 3-4 is silent, HUT2 at pdx.edu, and that's Portland State, pdx.edu. So really, from the bottom, thank you. Thanks for your patience, because I have run over my time, and I apologize, and I thank you.